Let's bring in the Deputy Premier of New South Wales now. John Barilaro joins us. Thanks for joining us again, John. Good to talk to you. First up, on the pandemic, you must be aware of this terrible case of little Thomas Collins, only 3 years old. A tragic prognosis for his family. There was no way his life could be saved. But to have Anastasia Palaszczuk block the family from coming home, they just want to come home without quarantine and actually share this terribly testing and poignant moment with their broader family. What sort of a country have we become when we block that sort of compassion?
Well, Chris, in your editorial, you made it absolutely clear that there is no explanation, that the risk is so small and not to allow a family to unite at a time of something so tragic. And as parents, I mean, none of us want to be in that position. And I just can't understand Premier Palaszczuk. We've got through the election. I was very critical leading into the election. But now to see, again, it seems to be spiked. It's Premier versus Premier. And they're using the border for political point scoring. And if you look at the cases in New South Wales, in Victoria, and then in Queensland, the risk is the same. And now's the time. You know, today the Victorian border is opened. What we need is the Queensland border to open so we don't have these situations in the future.
Now, none of this is easy, and I'm not pretending it's easy, and you would know more than most because you would have sat in those cabinet discussions and discussed these decisions. And there have been cases of the disease being brought into New South Wales across open borders from Victoria and the like. And you know, as politicians, you'll wear the consequences. So those conversations in cabinet must have been fascinating. You will have had some panicking politicians and others arguing for good sense, and you can't reveal that. But there must be a conscious decision that as a government, you have to prepare to be, you have to be prepared to wear some risk, because if you lose control of the virus, you'll pay a heavy price.
Yeah, absolutely. And people know that myself and the Treasurer have been quite, let's use the word trigger happy to lift restrictions sooner rather than later. But we get balanced against people like the Premier and others, including the science and the Chief Medical Officers. And we've been able to do it, I think, in a very measured way. And last week, when every state closed its borders to South Australia because of that one spike, and now in the end we've seen that has had many problems with it, we stayed open. The Premier copped a lot of criticism. We copped a lot of criticism. But borders can't be switched on and off. You can't just open them today, close them tomorrow, and vice versa. And that applies with restrictions. So what we've done is measure risk versus the balance of getting the economy back up and running, measure the risk against the decisions that we are making. We're doing it because of the facts, the data, the information and the health advice. But again, we're also prepared for a spike. And this is the message I always say to Australians. There will be moments where you will get a spike of 10, 15, 20, but we shouldn't panic. You know, before the pandemic, we had 550 ICU units in New South Wales. Today, we have over 2,500. We've built the infrastructure. We've got the contact tracing. We've got the health experts, so we can manage any outbreak. And there is no need to have knee-jerk reactions to either lifting restrictions or coming down harder restrictions or closing borders. And that's why we've got it right. We've got the balance right. Victoria's improved its game, but you know, South Australia was a great example. You cannot, off the back of one incident, close a border. And we saw that ripple effect in Tasmania, Victoria, Northern Territory, Queensland. It was New South Wales again that stood alone. And yet today, again, WA continues to talk about its borders closed, but they've got more active cases than New South Wales and Victoria combined. So it's politics before policy and politics before people.
Yeah, well said. It is just absurd. Let me go to another very difficult policy area, and that's energy and climate policy. And now your cabinet, the New South Wales government, has put up a very, very ambitious, some would say, foolish, others would say, renewable energy target, running now at odds with the federal government's plans to get more gas-fired energy into the system.
Well, that's not correct, Chris. You know, part of the energy platform and strategy for New South Wales includes gas as a transition, and 70 petajoules is what we've signed up for. That's why I'm in Narrabri tonight, tomorrow, to make further announcements around the Narrabri-Santos gas project, which we've given the initial green light, and we want to double down on that. And I've got more to say tomorrow. But we are including gas. We, of course, have a future of coal statement out there that talks about coal being part of the mix for the generations to come. So in real terms, we're finding the right mix. We're going to invest in renewables. We're going to invest in renewables in the renewable energy zones in regional and rural New South Wales. They are jobs. They're new industries. You know, at the same time, when we see battery storage improve, when we see hydropower becoming and hydro storage becoming part of the mix, but you know, we're not pulling away from gas, and we're definitely not pulling away from coal in the short term.
Well, your colleague, the Energy Minister, Matt Keane, sounds like he wants to pull away from gas. There's not much differentiating him from many on the left when it comes to energy policy. But and on that, you're putting up $50 million of taxpayers' money to support renewable schemes. We keep hearing these things of the future. The renewable energy is the cheapest, most effective way to go forward. Therefore, why does it need $50 million of taxpayers' money?
The $50 million is actually for more hydro in this state. It's our storage.
Well, pumped hydro to store electricity.
Yeah, pumped hydro. So we're keen to pursue that. And like everything, there's a bit of seed funding. There's no difference. We've got $100 million out there for businesses to expand their businesses. We've got $250 million in our Jobs First package to attract businesses from interstate and overseas. So as governments, what you do is you put incentives in place to attract investment early on. But you're right, I don't want to see anything subsidised forever and a day, and it has to be able to compete in the marketplace. But, you know, just because Matt Keane may not talk about gas as much as I do, it's his strategy, it's his energy platform for the state. It includes gas, and it was part of the bilaterals we signed with the federal government where we received billions of dollars of investment. So gas, let me make it absolutely clear, is part of this state's strategy going forward. I, as the mining minister, will be putting out a statement shortly of intent around our gas strategy with a proper gas proposal and strategy and policy for New South Wales middle of next year. So trust me, gas will be a big part of our landscape for today and decades to come.
John, thanks for joining us. It's good to see you back in the saddle.
Thank you. Thank you.
John Barilaro there, the Deputy Premier of New South Wales, who took some time off there after all sorts of controversies. Good to see him back and talking sense there. He's pro-gas, as you heard, and this will be sorted out between the federal and state coalition government.